Guys, Agers Scepter is actually one of my favorite weapons in the game. It's a stasis trace rifle, present in the kinetic slot. It has a lot of unique things going for it in its ability to synergize with aspects and fragments. I'm a big fan. But I stated earlier this week that I feel like the exotic catalyst is going to be needed in order to really elevate this weapon. Well, this has been data mined, and if you don't want to be spoiled, just click away from the video. But essentially, Agers Scepter's catalyst will allow for your super energy to be drained, but simultaneously will overflow the magazine, as well as empower the beam with bonus damage and the ability to slow and freeze targets until the magazine or super energy runs out, or until the weapon is stowed. And it states it at the bottom that it can only be activated when super energy is full. Now, I really wanted to lean into this. This is like reverse to lock, but instead of holding on to your super and getting a buff to your damage indefinitely, it drains your super. Now, as a brief recap here, the exotic perk found on this weapon is called Agers Call. Final blows with the weapons generates a slowing burst around the defeated target, hence why you're able to see these targets getting frozen one after another. Its trait is Riga's Refrain. Stasis final blows transfer ammo to this weapon's magazine from reserves. Now, I'll only bring these perks back up again because I want us to return real quickly back to the exotic catalyst, as it states that the bonus damage that the weapon receives after activating this, once you have full super, can be stopped if you either run out of super energy or until the magazine also runs out, and of course if the weapon is stowed. Now, something that we brought up the other day in regards to Riga's Refrain is that Stasis final blows will transfer ammo to this weapon's magazine from reserves, and that's any final blows. That's final blows from your supers, final blows from Stacy. You want to throw a Stasis turret out there? Rock the Stacy Tracy combo? You can't. And if Stacy happens to get a kill for you, your weapon will be auto reloaded. On top of that, the weapon itself with its multi-kills, especially in combination with certain aspects and fragments to even help it even more, getting those Stasis kills is really not that difficult. But I want to present a build today that may combat that super drain, as that's probably going to be the greater limiter here, right? Is there a way to maintain super as it's being drained? Or in the least, is there a way in which we can get our super back very, very quickly? Fellas, this takes us to our first Warlock build for this season, Agers Harmony, which is kind of poetic considering how much turmoil the Crow's previous life actually was. I know, I'm becoming a lore nerd, fellas. Regardless, Mantle of Battle Harmony. This is a Warlock exotic that comes with absorption cells. It says that takedowns of the weapons that have a damage type matching your subclass element will grant you super energy. But while your super energy is full, you instead gain a temporary bonus to weapon damage of the type matching your subclass element. Now, the damage is nice. That absorption cell from Mano is roughly a 20% increase there in damage upon getting kills. However, some things to remember about absorption cells: it doesn't stack with things like high energy fire, which I was already looking at that as a possible stacks on stacks on stacks. High energy fire, absorption cells, maybe even font of might. But from what Court was telling me earlier, high energy fire and Mano are both considered empowering buffs, therefore they do not stack. Now, even though I do like the 20% buff in its damage, especially when your super energy is full, I would argue and say its biggest benefit is just its super regeneration all on its own. That energy siphon, when getting kills, really aids in giving you your super, and you can see right here how quickly I'm getting my super. Now, we're not popping our super, and that's the thing here. We're not going to be popping our super. Even when the exotic catalyst for Agers Scepter actually begins to drop for us next week, we still won't be popping our super, but instead consuming it in whatever way. And I'm assuming, considering it's an entire super you will be consuming, it has to be a substantial buff to this trace rifle. Now, some other things here that are stacking with Mantle of Battle Harmony, Agers Scepter, and that super regeneration is, of course, Whisper of Bonds. Defeating frozen targets grants you super energy. I would argue and say that that's probably one of the biggest contributors here to what you're seeing in front of you. Yes, it knocks your intellect down. Yes, it knocks your discipline down. But this combination with things like Ice Flare Bolts, Bleak Watcher, constantly freezing targets off, and Agers Scepter all on its own, constantly freezing targets, it's not hard to dip into Whisper of Bonds with every single kill, thus giving us our super back very quickly. Now, someone's gonna ask, considering that this is a kinetic weapon, does rending work with Agers Scepter? We tested it out. No, it does not work, unfortunately. I was under the impression the other day it did work because I did see an increase in damage on frozen targets. However, that's just the 5% increase in damage that Agers Scepter gets on frozen targets all on its own. That's not based on the fragment rending, which is not necessary to get that damage buff. But speaking of buffs, what are some things that could really stack here? Well, Font of Might got a buff this past season. It was not good last season and only lasted about 5 seconds, and it was like a 10% buff. Pretty worthless for the most part. Now though, it lasts for 10 whole seconds, and it has a 20 25% buff there that's being tacked on. Now, a couple of hoops that you have to jump through here. Number one, you have to, of course, spawn Stasis wells. Elemental armaments are actually better this season. They're a little more consistent, although they're still not as consistent. We do have other elemental well mods coming out next week and the weeks beyond that, and there are artifact mods too that can help with this. But elemental armaments is what I was taking advantage of today, and for the most part, it did all right. And upon picking up one of these Stasis wells, I was able to walk around flat-footed for 10 seconds with a 25% buff to my damage. Now, some other added benefits that you can get from picking up wells. Well of potency states that picking up a matching elemental well grants you super energy. Now, it costs 5, and I actually don't really feel like it's as potent as it should be, but you can, of course, rock something like this to get your super energy back even faster. And again, as we get deeper into the season, producing more and more of those elemental wells, especially Stasis wells, will just get even easier to do. You also have Font of Wisdom. Now, this mod actually increases your intellect. It maxes it out. Unfortunately, though, it does not go beyond that max, meaning if you are going to go for a Font of Wisdom build, do not rock high intellect. Even today, I see so many people rocking Font of Wisdom with tier 10 intellect, and there's literally no benefit whatsoever. It does not exceed the cap. Where it's actually beneficial, though, is its ability to allow you to stack in your neutral game abilities and elsewhere, and pretty much leave that intellect at the bare minimum. Now, someone's going to ask, what about high energy fire? We've got mods like Sustained Charge, where you can become charged with light by simply defeating combatants with auto rifles, trace rifles, or machine guns. And that, in combination with Ager Scepter, should easily produce charge with light, thus allowing us to take advantage of that plus 20% increase in damage from high energy fire, which, by the way, does stack with Font of Might. You're talking roughly a 50% increase in total damage. It's nice. And even though Absorption Cells does not stack with high energy fire, and it is a waste, if this data leak is true, if this exotic catalyst is going to be draining our super but giving us this overwhelming damage bonus, why would you ever hang on to your super at all? If the law of buffs and debuffs works the way we're hoping it will work, I'm looking to really depend on Mantle of Battle Harmony, Whisper of Bonds to produce super energy as quickly as possible, getting me to my super to then consume my super for that bonus damage. And in the process, while I'm getting Stasis kills with Ager Scepter, I'm constantly producing Stasis wells, I'm constantly getting Font of Might, and simultaneously proccing high energy fire with Charge with Light, getting that increase in damage. We're talking a 50% increase on top of whatever it is the exotic catalyst is going to give us. This build right here, just for what I'm using it for, not even in its perfected form, was really, really good. And I was actually taking advantage of weapons like Reed's Regret with the perk Harmony, which, by the way, is one of the most forgiving perks in the game, as just getting kills with other weapons and then swapping to the weapon that has Harmony will grant a 7-second 20% buff. Not saying it's the god roll or anything. Obviously, there's other rolls better on Reed's Regrets, and plus it's already been confirmed that firing line is in fact bugged. Cosmo said that it's not working as intended. However, for solo scenarios, I actually really do like Harmony. And of course, it's a toss-up between like Harmony and Vorpal. Regardless though, guys, there's a lot of things synergizing here, especially for my Warlock users. Don't get me wrong. Titans, Hunters, they have Stasis subclasses that can synergize well here. And you don't even have to rock a Stasis subclass with Ager. However, I advise you should. All of these fragments that you see me using right here, guys, synergize so well. That with Ice Flare Bolts on Warlocks, Mantle of Battle Harmony, dipping in with Whisper of Bonds, everything here is shaping up to be the perfect build next week. Will it be the perfect build though? We'll see. Now, before I let you guys go, big shout out to Tyler Kelly. Tyler, you're the one that actually got me onto this build. That's right. Fellas, if you ever have build suggestions, come by our Discord. We have an entire Discord devoted to just builds. You could drop down your suggestions there, or maybe even pick up a few for yourself. But big shout out to Tyler there. Thank you so much, man. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.